Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Freedom Friday. There is a lot to talk about. It's been a long time since I've put anything up, and that's mainly because I've just been so dang busy working a bunch of shifts. And last week, went down to Orlando, Florida to take the kids down on vacation and do all the fun stuff down there, and drop my daughter off for an internship that she's got down there. So that was exciting. That was fun to go down there. And it's the first time I'd been down to Florida, and very nice place. Highly recommend. Um, if you're sensitive to heat and humidity, you may want to consider going a different time of year. But we had a good time. Um, so this week we got a lot of new stuff going on. Of course, one of the lieutenants of Bin Laden was vaporized over the last couple weeks. That's a good thing, whether it's Biden that did it or Obama that did it or the cat and hat that did it. That's always a good thing when some maniacal terrorist who is responsible for killing Americans ends up getting atomized. So, good win there. Obviously, the big thing in the news right now is the Mar-a-Lago search warrant and the FBI raiding uh, Trump's property down there. And it's funny, something very, very funny happened with this, and I believe it's an MSNBC clip you can pull up on the internet, on YouTube. And in that clip, there's the little ticker on the bottom as they're interviewing a mouthpiece for the FBI. And obviously, this thing went off entirely different than the Democrats and the political arm of the DOJ anticipated. So he's on there trying to do damage control, and at the bottom of the ticker on the screen, the headline marker says FBI raids Trump's Mar-a-Lago residence. And one of the first things that this FBI spokesperson says is, well, we raid is really kind of a strong word. It connotates, things that really weren't going on. It was a systematic search, and it was a lawful execution of a search warrant. And as he's talking, the clowns at MSNBC are furiously retyping that ticker for the headline to say FBI executes search warrant seeking potential evidence at Mar-a-Lago, something to that nature. If you don't think, you haven't thought, and you still don't think that the Democrats play the entire narrative for your mainstream media, that is the best shining example that I have ever seen when the guest is on there and they actually are in progress of changing their narrative as he's telling them to change their narrative. Okay, it was a raid. They always call it a raid. It's always been a raid. It was a raid. That's what it was. If you don't like that vernacular, then maybe just issue a subpoena, like they'd already done on some stuff and had already been down there. And it's interesting that the hate started with Donald Trump the moment he came down the escalator and announced that he was running. Ann Coulter, during the runs, was asked who the strongest Republican contender was on the ballot for the primary ticket. She said Donald Trump. She got laughed in her face by several of these prestigious, intelligent reporters that were in the same broadcast session as her. And the establishment that exists is absolutely terrified of Donald Trump. That's why they started their investigations, their harassment on him back then. The news media completely fed whatever narrative that the DNC wanted them to feed to the American public. It started the moment that he started running for president. There was a 2-year Mueller investigation. There was 2 phony impeachments. And now that we're starting to see a couple things, there's going to be most likely a huge red shift in the midterms this fall. And polls start coming out, and Donald Trump seems to be the strong contender in the polls. So what happens in short succession with that? Well, he hasn't announced that he's running yet, but he's made statements that kind of sound like somebody run for president again. All of a sudden, Liz Cheney's daddy, Dick Cheney, comes out, does an ad for her, pulls a little stump ad, telling the world that Donald Trump is the biggest threat to democracy that there's ever been. And obviously, Liz Cheney is no fan of his. She is a Republican in name only. That's all she's ever been. She just couldn't ever win the state of Wyoming with a D after her name. So, pumping a bunch of outsider dollars in and running her campaign, she managed to get elected, and she's done absolutely nothing constructive since she has been elected. And so Dick Cheney comes out with this big thing. Well, that doesn't do a whole lot for the cause other than it puts more traction underneath the Trump campaign that is soon coming. So, lo and behold, the FBI executes a search warrant and does this raid, and that's going to make everybody, okay, now finally we've got the smoking gun. Well, how are you ever going to believe these people? You're talking about the same FBI that when that knucklehead that worked in the bureau back in D.C. And him and some female associate attorney or something were kicking boots back there, and they end up pulling their cell phone records, and they're making statements on their cell phone records. Mind you, this is somebody who has sworn the oath to uphold and protect the Constitution in his duties working at the FBI, perhaps one of the most important enforcement groups as it relates to our nation, maybe just secondly behind the CIA, is talking about how they've got a plan B so that Trump can never win. And it's funny because when that was going down and that was investigated, there was never this talk about insurrection then. That 100% is the definition of an insurrection, is doing something to overthrow a legal, lawful political process, to thwart certain people from getting in positions of power in government. You got the January 6th investigation. Of course, that's been going on. That's been the drumbeat since January 6th. Boom, 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 on and on we go. Well, one person died in that event, and that person was actually a female. Arguably, she may or may not have intended to get into the Capitol. She was unarmed. There was a mob of people behind her. Many of the people were insider players, and she gets shot by Capitol Police, which seemed like it was a little bit excessive. And she died. That's who died. That's what came of that. You've got all these big players like Ray Epps on video encouraging the crowd to breach the Capitol, to breach fences. Ray Epps wasn't the only one, but it's interesting because Ray Epps, all of a sudden, he escapes everything. And if you go back and watch those videos, which can be readily accessed off YouTube, he is one of the only ones in the group saying, we are going to enter the Capitol. We are going to crash these fences. We're going in. And it's so far removed from what the sentiment of the rest of the crowd was involved in that they start chanting, Fed, 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 Fed. If he was not some kind of a federal operative to stir this thing, then this is the weirdest set of coincidences that's ever happened, because he never got called to task. You've got the Whitmer thing, the investigation that was going up there with the quote-unquote attempted kidnapping of Gretchen Whitmer, the governor. One of the head FBI agents that was involved with that whole thing, come to find out, he gets fired for beating the snot out of his wife in a domestic violence situation after they came from a tea party. No, it wasn't a tea party. It was a full-on upside-down pineapple fest going on that they were coming from. So quality people here. If you can look at this at face value and say that the FBI and don't get me wrong, there's lots of good folks in the FBI, as there is in any organization, but the leadership and the governance given to the leadership through the Biden administration and through the DNC has corrupted that organization to the point that people will no longer trust it. Um, and quite frankly, the FBI has had a long history of all kinds of things like this. They do a lot of good. There's a lot of good people there. Do not get me wrong, but you've got Randy Weaver up in Idaho, a undercover Fed, and a CI take a shotgun to him to get a barrel shortened down. The agent or the CI that was on scene, they wanted it cut to a certain length. Well, with shotguns, you can only go so short with the barrel before it becomes known as a sawed-off shotgun and is illegal. It has to maintain a certain length, being a shouldered shotgun. Randy Weaver cut the barrel off in the place where he knew it would be legal. They brought the shotgun back to him and said, "Hey, can you take just a little more off?" And bat on Randy for doing it, but hardly the crime of the century. He takes some more off, and it takes just enough off to break that barrier of being a bona fide sawed-off shotgun. So they go into his compound with the search warrants and the hostage rescue team and snipers, and lo and behold, before this damn thing is over, his wife is shot, his dog is shot. I mean, just a huge blunder. Go back to the Janet Reno days, Waco, Texas. They go down there to storm the Waco compound, and lo and behold, the whole thing turns into a blazing fire, and how many people died in that. So sometimes the FBI can certainly show its side of being politically motivated. And you've got all the way up to Merrick Garland. So Merrick Garland talks about how he was the one that authorized this, and that very well may be. But if you think for a minute that he didn't run this by Biden and by Pelosi and other top Democrats, you're out of your mind. An operation, the first in its history in our nation, that's been around since 1776. Executing a search warrant on an ex-president's home. If you don't think they ran that all the way up the flagpole for clearance, you are out of your mind. But you see, they caught the political wind, and of course you can tell what the talking point is because they all sound like a robot. You've got Chuck Schumer. Well, I didn't find out until I was reading it on my cell phone. Nancy Pelosi, I didn't find out until I was reading it on my cell phone. Biden, I didn't find out until some of my staffers told me. You can always pick out the talking points because the news and the politicians will almost regurgitate verbatim the exact same line, and that's the line they're told to toe. So going back to Merrick Garland, also this week after this happened, you had Representative Gates make a statement, and I can't remember what forum that was in, if that was in some kind of a session or if this was just something with him speaking with the media. But he made this statement to Merrick Garland: come next year, come 2023, I want you to make sure that you keep all your texts, your emails, your documents, and clear your calendar, because there's going to be an accounting that takes place with an oversight. So then you get Chuck Schumer. He's on MSNBC with the esteemed pencil neck Rachel Maddow, and she is pontificating with him about how evil this is, and that Gates has given an open threat to the FBI. Well, okay, let's think about this. The FBI is not using a special counsel, which they should, because Merrick Garland operates under the discretion of Biden. If Merrick Garland wants to continue through another term, then it depends on Biden being reelected. There's a huge conflict of interest for them to be doing this without the use of a special counsel. So he's talking to Rachel Maddow. They're carrying on about how bad this whole thing is, and for Gates to come out and say this, it's threatening the intelligence community and the FBI, and basically saying it's out of place, it's uncalled for, and it shouldn't be done. But the interesting thing is the modern day media and what politicians say get categorized digitally forever. And normal people that used to not be able to have access to this stuff and didn't have the time to get records or the knowledge of how to get records and things that were said, that's all come to an end. Everything that anybody says that is anybody gets recorded and saved there. So back then, Joe, so going back this week, Representative Gates, bad guy. He's basically threatening the FBI. Let's hear what Schumer today has to say on it. So here's Schumer again with Rachel Maddow.
Right after the election, but I'm now actually invigorated by the challenge and our ability to succeed in this challenge.
Let me ask you, I don't know if you have seen this. I don't want to blindside you with this. This is the latest statement, latest tweet, as you were just saying, President-elect's latest unsolicited pronouncement on the intelligence community. This was his tweet just a little while ago tonight. You see the scare quotes there.
Now remember, this is years ago, a couple years ago.
Russian hacking was delayed until Friday. Perhaps more time needed to build a case. Very strange. We're actually told, intelligence sources tell NBC News since this tweet has been posted, that actually this intelligence briefing for the president-elect was always planned for Friday. It hasn't been delayed. But he's taking these shots, this antagonism, this taunting to the intelligence community.
You take on the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you. So
you take on the intelligence community, and they have 6 days from Sunday to get back at you. That right there is exactly what's going on right now. They are so terrified of Trump that they need to damage him beyond repair politically and or criminally, seek some kind of an indictment and pray that it goes through to a conviction so that he can no longer qualify for federal office. That is what's going on. And if you guys aren't seeing it, you are blinder than a bat, because all roads lead to Rome. I mean, this is a guy that has been continually investigated by a throng of high-level investigators since before he was president in 2016, all the way through today, August 2022. And it's not going to end here. And if you think for a minute that, well, let's get Trump out of the mix, and don't get me wrong, I would be more than happy to vote for a DeSantis ticket, for a few others that are out there that would do a stand-up superb job. But if you think for a moment, as a conservative, that this will end when Trump leaves, you're out of your mind. The communist radicals in this nation that hide under the umbrella of being a Democrat will stop at nothing to gain and maintain power. But with that being said, it went a little bit longer than I wanted to go. You guys go out there and kill it this weekend. It's a beautiful day. Get outside, even a little bit hot, but go get some vitamin D and spend some time with the fam, and we'll catch you on the next one.